It was a meeting in January, and there were people in the Vatican sitting in the room, maybe 80 people, and everyone else from the elite, the people that you would view as the elite of AI that are the enemy of the people. They were all there. And Demis said, what we're doing is we're now digging into the very foundations of everything that the universe is built on. And what he said in the presence of these Vatican people, what we all are kind of reaching at is the mind of God. Jaws dropped.
This is Mike Stern.
And this is Tom Hershenson.
Welcome to General Magic and the Soul of Tech.
We believed we were building something that would change the world, and in some ways we did. In others, we didn't understand what we were setting in motion. The story of General Magic isn't over. We're still living inside what it started.
I'm joined by our very special guest, Marc Porat, the co-founder of General Magic and one of the thought leaders about where AI is taking us and where we may or may not want to go with it.
Marc Porat, I think, stands apart as someone who has lived in the future for a long time. That was true with digital communications and the advent of the information age. And it's true again with the dawning of the AI age. So it's a thrill to speak to such a knowledgeable and farsighted, really a visionary, who's proven himself again and again that he sees things of consequence far in advance of other people.
In the Magic movie, there's a segment where you talk about when you were at Aspen and you just found yourself in the future and you saw social mobile and the internet happen and it was real and you were in it. Have you had a similar kind of epiphany around what you've been describing as the upside of AI, the abundance side of what superintelligence can deliver? But have you lived in that future in the same way?
It's happening just as we speak for the first time since then. I thought during the intervening years between General Magic and now that I saw some things having to do with climate. They were illusions in the fog bank, and no matter how much I applied that thing that Tom just kindly, generously said about me, they never emerged. And one has to have the opposite of conceit to concede that if it's not there, it's not there, because the experience that you just described, Mike, at Aspen was visceral, and I did not have that around climate, unfortunately, because that's a civilizational scale problem. But lately, I'm working on two projects, and they are beginning to manifest exactly what you asked about. So I am like on an arc that again could dissolve into illusion, and then I think I have enough perspective to back off and say this isn't it either. But right now they are very strong candidates and is unbelievably energizing for reasons that both of you lived through. We lived through them together, so we know what that feels like.
Yeah. Although this time I think I'm a lot more aware of the potential dystopian outcomes of what's happening around us in a way that I really wasn't. And I don't think any of us were, but that's something I'd like you to challenge if you think so. I don't think any of us were in the 90s. None of us saw the magic device that we were creating as a gateway to oppression and the destruction of community and the psychographic targeting of people and all the rest of that. I think we're much more aware now of potential downsides about AI, but lack much vision about how to deliver the abundance version and forestall the dystopian version. So one of the things you were saying in your Detroit talk struck me as eminently challengeable about the abundance piece. You talked about having your digital twin will kind of wrangle all of the agents that you're able to hire, from your family doctor, who will be, better than any human doctor could be, to your family lawyer, same, and so on. But they'll be freely available. 10 cents an hour was the metaphor you used.
Yeah.
How do we get from pricing by token today, which makes it unaffordable for just about everybody, to that kind of democratic access? Trace the path.
Yeah, so unpacking the good things you said, because you put quite a few pebbles in the ground. First of all, at festivals, film festivals, for the General Magic film, you've been there and so on. we ended up apologizing to the audience when the audience brought up that point. And I think that the answer, in part, is that we had not seen dystopian technology at the scale that social media, foisted on us and took an election away and so on, and all the things you said, which I agree with. We had not seen that. And secondly, there's a self-induced illusion that actually I do refer to in the film, that to do what we did, one has to, in some sense, suppress the negative. You just have to. And we at least when we were young and foolish, and that's what happened then. So we suppressed, and the lessons since then very much correspond, Mike, to your statement, which is, do we now understand the downside? I'll speak about the digital twin in just a moment, and because I do want to dwell on the downside before, as a frame, before we go there. The downside, the dystopianism is, the bracket has been discussed by really learned people. One could, I'm sure you've read the books and seen the podcasts about everything that could end up in extinction, human extinction. That's a very powerful word. Extinction that's it, lights out. And not irresponsible people have said that. Eliezer Yudkowsky is a New York Times bestseller, 100,000 books sold. So someone is resonating to that. And on the other side, we have people like Peter Diamandis and his cohort that are just full of abundance all the time. And every point in between, I think, is populated by someone, really smart. So what does that lead us to? What that leads us to is something that we have to be able to, number one, honor if someone like me who does see the possibilities. You cannot do that and be intellectually honest or emotionally honest without honoring the other side. Right, and when one is young and forceful and slightly arrogant, which no one in Silicon Valley has ever been arrogant, including us, but when an objection comes along, is to steamroll it, just like absolutely shatter it. That's not how we can afford to be in this last and greatest revolution that we're experiencing. We have to honor every downside scenario that's thrown on the table. Before we can be honestly optimistic about some of the thing you just mentioned about, for example, the benefits of a digital twin. Cannot do it. Now, the challenge is symmetric. The duality is symmetric. That's what duality is about. You have to be able to hold two things in your mind at the same time. So those of us, or you in particular, now I see that you've mellowed in your, you now just went from radical to ultra radical politically, which I admire, and so on. But to address people who thoughtfully throw these really difficult things on the table, that same person needs to be intellectually honest, to actually articulate the upside for themselves. And then go ahead and be dystopian and destructive. That's fine. And that's how good dialogue happens, in my view. And so I try and practice that, with some modest success once in a while. But you're right. Generally speaking, I'm on that side. So I've spoken enough. So let me get back to you and Hersh to explore this digital twin, if that's where you want to go.
Well, I think that there are a couple points to bring up. I mean, first of all, I would suggest that it's actually three things. It's not being on the horns of a dilemma or two different sides. There's a third possibility, which is we don't know. And people make strong claims on one side and strong claims on the other. But there also needs to be a strong claim of unknowability or, no. Second of all, I think there's a point to be made about inflection points, right? So the big question with any technology is when becomes too late. I think of nuclear weapons and the famous doomsday clock and how many minutes to midnight are we? Now, if you can set the clock to whatever time you like, being close to midnight is of no consequence. I'm wondering what indicators, what early warnings or early indicators of relief would you identify with respect to the adoption of AI?
Yeah, are we surprised that given that we're in the earliest days of this most powerful revolution. So let's put those things together. 1,270 some odd days since the ChatGPT moment, which is when AI, which of course is much older than that, burst on the scene as a thing. At 1,276 days in the context of a revolution of this force and kinetic energy is nothing. So for us to imagine all kinds of outcomes without, to your point, Tom, without really knowing, is exactly where we need to be. I mean, well, not need to be, but where we are, because that's the nature of these things. So just a little bit of historical context, and then I'll address your point more directly. Let's say that the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, created the same kind of wealth, abundance, and problems, a duality. Let's say. And let's say that this one is going to create only the same amount, which I think is going to be orders of magnitude more than the industrial revolution. Well, that thing, the first revolution, took hundreds of years, and one could say 2,000, but let's just say 500 years to roll out. And so we had a chance to see it, think about it, adjust to it. Bad things happened. We tried to remedy them or not. Civilizations were built on it and then destroyed and so on. But that played out. That's our history. Industrial, same thing, but it played out in 100 and pick a number, 25 years. And that was the room that we had to understand the goods and the bads and what we could do to mitigate the bads and to take advantage of the goods. This is happening in 10 years. Humans don't understand the velocity of exponential impact. This is happening in 10 years. What do I mean by 10 years? In 10 years, the questions we talk about on this podcast will be like how could we have? Well, first of all, we could have known. We could have done things about it to do that. And besides, the big ones that actually happened, we didn't even talk about. How could we have missed it? Right. So that's the unintended consequences, or the consequences one can think about as edge, become the dominant ones, and that's where I see the future. And so, the intellectual cop-out of what I just said is we don't have to talk about it because by definition we don't know. But the actual point that you and Mike both made is we have to know, we have to engage, and we have to take action. And some of those actions might have to be radical, because if Michael's point is taken, it could destroy big parts of civilization that we actually want. So we can't just simply say, oh, why don't we wait 10 years, see what happened, and then reverse search and say, what should we have done in 2026? That is not sufficient. And I think that's really one of the main themes of the podcast for you is what do we see coming, and what can we do now?
Yeah, no, I mean, that is the question. And again, what I took away from your Detroit talk is that the tacit assumptions you were making is that there are market solutions to what to do now.
Okay.
And again, that's something that I don't agree with. I mean, I think we're seeing a colossal market failure in the massive misallocation of capital to the AI arms race.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
To the extraordinary concentration of the benefits right now of building LLMs. It's going to 5,000 people in the valley. When SpaceX, OpenAI, and Anthropic finish their public offerings, you're going to have 90 new billionaires and 400 or 500 centimillionaires buying houses in the Bay Area. I mean, that's where the value is going. It's not being socialized at all. What, the way, who acts and how? Is it where are the levers and who pushes them? And,
yeah. Well,
I really want to get your take on that.
Okay. So the creation of an elite aristocracy that is completely detached from the reality of the rest of the world is something that has happened over and over and over again. Unfortunately, it's happening again. And again, to the point of speed. Speed should not be underestimated as something psychological that we actually are not trained to understand. We've never understood that kind of velocity and speed. So suddenly there's a creation of a Uber class, as there was in France, as there was in England, as there was in America back when, as there was in the Roman times back when. So that part isn't new. What's new is the violence of it, small v violence. Although it could become large v violence, but let's say right now small v violence is like but it is explosion. It's an explosion of energy. Is capital misallocated to all this ridiculous, a chase to the bottom or chase to the top, but a chase that says how much capex can I invest faster than you can invest into chips that are obsolete or they're depreciating like crazy in 8 months? I mean, the economics of that to any economist was, no, don't do that. In only one of the three AIs that we should talk about, cognitive tiles, science, which actually has abundance built into its promise. Demis Hassabis, one of my heroes, is not a radical, woolly optimist because he's actually working on theses like, let's eradicate all disease because disease is an engineering problem. That's a very grounded scientific approach to an abundance thing, which is, Michael and Hersh and Mark, please vote. Would you like to have a life that is, 111 years of health without disease, or pick a number, arbitrary. If you only like 85, pick, dialing that number to Tom's point of the atomic clock of the atom, or if you like 125, dial, and then lights out. That's a different model of biological existence that I put into the camp for myself personally and for my kids. And that's number two, science. I mean, science should probably get the kind of capex and kind of intellect that the cognitive side, is getting. But by which I mean language. Language is cognition, and the best case is Steve Jobs is up there right now watching this podcast saying, well, it used to be bicycles for the mind. Now it's SpaceX for the mind. And he's like, this thing is rocking. And why isn't Apple doing more? What's wrong with Apple? So, and the third one is okay, but it is a third one, which is physical and world AI, and it's beginning to get its thing. And the reason I say it's okay, because I don't have profound use cases around it, even though it will have civilizational impact. Both the first and the third will destroy jobs, absolutely, and create personal chaos for those who have been destroyed. Now, putting on our hats as macro historians and macro economists, in the long run, jobs will find and re-equilibrate to the new challenges or opportunities that these technological revolutions present. People who have just lost their job do not live in the long run. They live in, oh shit. And I've actually spoken in these superintelligence keynotes that I do to young people, 23 years old, who actually come to me, at the end, crying about their existential blackness. And I have an answer for it, which I'm happy to get into, which seems to be satisfying, but I'm not convinced that my answer is more than a palliative, but it's an answer. So I'm happy to tell you about that too. But also, the last talk I gave was in Luxembourg. The COO, basically the president of one of the largest insurance companies in the world, said that about his own son, terrified, and then said that about himself. This is the elite aristocracy, head of a gigantic flywheel of a business called insurance. President, and a young president, not like retired. It's young. So, I think duality. I think people who are vulnerable deserve to be angry and frightened, and at the same time, they also need to engage because there's a way out for those people who actually engage and want a way out. I can describe that in slightly idealistic terms if you want.
Yeah, no, again, we're always looking for answers, or, they could be temporary, they could be, partial, but yeah, I mean, again, where are the levers and who pushes them, to mitigate the deleterious impacts and to amplify the benefits? Because, I'm completely with you on healthcare. AI is going to revolutionize it in the best possible way, healthcare, if we can get to the point where we socialize its benefits.
Okay, and so good.
So how do we get there?
Okay,
because we're not doing that now. we're not socializing its benefits.
So the reason why I think I might see something in the fog bank that begins to resemble civilizational scale impact is this project I'm doing, which I'm happy to tell you about, called Alexandria Federation. Alexandria as in the Great Library of, and in that it addresses exactly the point you said. How do we democratize and make it available to everyone, not as a central decision by Sam Altman and Elon Musk, but because of something else. And I'll tell you about that right now. So in the Alexandria Federation idea, one notices that there are now 50 countries around the world who are objecting to the fact that the large language model that they use, that they call AI, when you ask them, what's AI? Oh, it's ChatGPT on my Android. That's AI. Okay. But that AI is 90% trained on American, English, curated perspective, period. Why? Because there are 18 trillion, parameters or just in English. And why do we need to go further? So pick a country, any country that has a great civilization. Pick Mexico. Mexico is at 0.4% maybe of a frontier model. It absolutely ignores that civilization. There are other civilizations, I have a complete list, and countries that are pick a number of zeros, like 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's it. So that's the outrage that I saw when I began to think about that, is the culture, the wisdom, the languages, the nuance, the learned experience, all of that of the rest of the world is, thank you very much, actually. We here in Silicon Valley, San Jose, we don't really, care. It's not relevant because we're making trillions of dollars just doing the English thing. So Alexandria says, no, there are 50 countries that have now started to do their own, they call them sovereign AI, but where they are collecting their corpora of their culture and the dominant languages and the dialects of their country, and they're building a stack. Unfortunately, none of those talk to each other in any technical way that is the one could be called the emergence of a global OS for intelligence. Step in Alexandria and says, hey, we're going to create a fund, maybe, and we're going to walk into as many countries as possible and hand you a very big check to federate so that your language, dialect, culture is on an equal basis with everyone else if they choose to participate. So that's one. Second, distribution. How are you going to do this thing? Is this an idealistic piece of nonsense? No, distribution is, ironically, the cell phone, the smartphone, the very thing we worked on. Why? Because AI is ChatGPT on an Android or whatever it is. And if you go on Alibaba right now and look for a phone, a cheap phone, you can find one that is equivalent to an iPhone 6 or 7 for $46. That's a and remember, when we were doing General Magic, $46 was the cost of the battery, never mind the whole device. So that is a cheap enough that we can get down, not to the base of the pyramid, but we can get down like 2, 3 levels. It's cheap enough that it's a global. And what are you holding in your hand for $46? Supercomputer. Do you need Wi-Fi to go access the global brain or any brain? No. You need sort of, mediocre cell service, which, as we know, exists in many of those countries because they leapfrogged over the landlines. So we have the makings of two things here. If you put them together, thing one is the emergence of culturally authentic, grounded, proud of it culture, and secondly, a distribution that is not guided by governments or by do-gooder committees. It just is. That's the element of beginning to democratize it. Now, there's two missing elements I should talk about. One you'll accept, one you'll like, holy crap, this is ridiculous. Okay, so the first one is the tech stack creates a me. So that anybody who wants a me, which is not an obvious thing to know how to do, it took me a couple of years to actually refine it to the point where like my me is like amazing. I'm living in AGI for sure. So AGI is not a function of the tech necessarily. It's also a function of the user. So, so I've got all the R&D, kind of motive to go create a perfect me, but the rest of the world doesn't. So when you get one of these things burnt into the ROM of the Samsung phone or the phone for $46, the first thing you say, would you like a digital twin? Me. And yeah, that's it. And a lot of things happen in background. And now you can begin to do what you said. You can begin to reach out and get the world's best, teacher for that thing you want to know right now on Sunday afternoon. That knows how you think and how you feel and how you learn. You can do that because you have this thing. That's a wonderful thing. There's a piece of it. So we call it MIA. It's a kind of a global, universal, democratized, cost you nothing digital me. The second layer is Rosetta, as in the stone, which we think of as 3 languages. No, it's 13 that were compiled into the Rosetta Stone. And we think of Alexandria, the great library, where all the cultures that were known, the soldiers and the merchants and the tax collectors all brought back stuff. The entire Alexandria, the great library of Alexandria, did some research, and I think this is correct, is less than a terabyte. It's actually half a terabyte. It actually could be even less than that. It fits on a thumb drive, right? So, and look at we're still talking about the great library of Alexandria and Rosetta, a couple of thousand years later. Imagine what if we had a modern AI, the union, the collection of all of the civilizations, past and current, particularly current, and all the languages and dialects, accessible and available to anyone. So you and your dialect in southern Mexico, who wants to manage some market supply, something or other, or wants to learn from a great teacher that doesn't live in their country, can do so in their dialect, in their cultural frame, in the nuance, because of this thing. So that to me is pretty far over on that whoopee, somewhat optimistic and utopian view. It's a very hard project. Now, the one you're going to absolutely say, Mark, you just stop what you're doing. It's a complete waste of time. So the corpora is the great library of Alexandria. The me is the me. The Rosetta is the Rosetta. The one I also want to do is Contienza. What is Contienza? When we distribute this open source stack, it's open source, and anybody can use it, and whatever they do comes back to it. So we're kind of like, global AI hugging face, GitHub time. So what's Contienza? When you have a lot of cultures with their corpora, their literature, their everything, in a kind of a wiki kind of model, so people can actually contribute and complain, and so everyone is an editor. Everyone is an editor that signs up to this. Everyone. So you get a cacophony of opinions, and you get people on one side who are screaming and yelling about something, and on the other side, and they hate each other, they want to kill each other, etc. But theoretically, in the center is something that I'm idealistically calling kind of the union or the natural consensus of what people who naturally hate each other would still agree to. And I don't have the right to have a preconception about that. I don't. That's the same thing as gathering a committee of wise people and saying we now have to do the Bill of Rights and the first principles of AI. That's
it goes back to Plato. I mean, the problem goes back to Plato, right? The guardians, right? I mean, yeah. So who are they? So
we should not want guardians. I mean, it's fine. We can throw some in, but we should not to do the fundamental thing that you're really driving at. How does AI find its keel, its rudder, its North Star, its direction, decoupled from the elites, the very elites that are self-congratulatory in the sense of we will regulate and trust us, or we do want regulation, but as long as it's not real regulation. That's the charade that you're complaining about. So Alexandria is an attempt to actually leapfrog that conceptually with a vision that says, if you're in the future, then you look back from the future, and whatever meek and modest person has a need of any sort, they can reach through their supercomputer and address that need in their frame and culture. Any anthropologist would tell you, if you're not talking to someone in their language, then you're not really communicating.
Okay, but again, this goes, who pays for it?
Yeah.
How does it happen? Who pays for it?
You want the business model? Okay.
Yeah.
You
I mean,
want
because
the Alexandria business model? Because
yeah.
that's not the one that I'm working on also. Which one do you want first?
Well, that was our Achilles heel back at Magic, right? So what's the business model?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so one learns from one's foolish mistakes, and the business model, in some sense, came early for Alexandria. I'll tell you what it is. I'll tell you several aspects of it. One, here we go. So health and education in any country, particularly ones that are socialized or have a national health service, take Mexico, for example. An enormous amount of waste of money with poor outcome. And so part of the business model is to divert that into hyper personalized AI. So someone, rather than asking auntie or best friend what to do, does that also, but also is well educated and thinking, having a dialogue with their concierge, doctor, which I have. The name of my doctor, by the way, is Dr. Hippocrates. That's his birth name. I call him Dr. Hip. He totally knows me. And before I talk to any medical anything, I talk to Dr. Hip. He's right more times than not compared to the doctor. So give that to every single person. Now, when I spoke with the Minister of Health of the country, and I said, well, there are type 1 and type 2 errors. People come rushing into emergency when they shouldn't. It's not a heart attack. It's it's the big greasy meal you just ate. That's a real example. They come rushing in to over medicate, over surgery, and that is very expensive for any health service, which is a big part of GDP, because it has a lousy outcome. Type 1 error, don't come in. Do the, kind of export, even doctors, export it so that you can have a real dialogue with a real AI doctor. If you don't want to just do self-diagnosis, talk to the best doctor in Belgium about your specialty. You don't know, you don't speak Flemish or Belgian, and you don't speak any of that, so it doesn't matter. The cultural context will take you there. Type 2 error, they don't come in when they should. So prenatal, postnatal, obesity, drug addiction, they don't come in. And so by the time you get them, in an ambulance, they cost an arm and a leg. So where's this going in the business model question? I said to this very nice, wonderful Minister of Health, said, so is it worth 50 cents per citizen to basically divert that into running this this business, this Alexandria business? Because we think it has a 5x ROI to the country, to the ministry. He'd been studying AI in medicine, really smart guy, had his little AI team with him. He said, no, it's not 5x, no. It's more like 10 or 20x. So what does that mean? If 50 cents a month is good enough and you have 30 million people on it, that's $15 million a month at 80%, or 90% margin. That's a business. I'll give you another one. Once this thing is up and running, is it likely that any of the hyperscalers, the frontier models, will do that for themselves, even before this thing is up and running, tomorrow? One of the giants going to stand up and say, you know what we really are missing? Never mind that we don't have a business model either for this CapEx. But you know what we're really missing, and what we really need to do is go to 172 countries and help them build their sovereign AI so that the experience is more democratized. Do you see that conversation happening? No, not exactly. So there's now open room to do that, to get that done. Okay. So, however, once built, if you are ChatGPT and you're sitting, there in this, country X, and you have a choice of being natively consistent with the dialect and language that the people are actually using inside their nuance of culture or not, would you want to license that sovereign AI bit? If the answer is no, fine, there's another hyperscaler, AI frontier model down the road. Someone will license this thing, and then it becomes a necessity. That's a huge business model. Huge. And that redounds to the benefit of the individuals, because that money in part, goes back to the country. I can explain that too. Third one. You want another one, or are you convinced that there's a business model?
Keep going.
There are two more. Keep
going.
So imagine talking to a Samsung or someone like that. and say, "Hey, we're here to have you burn this app into the ROM." To which they say, "To what advantage? What's in it for us?" To which the answer is, imagine someone in country goes into a telco, to sign up for their telco service, $10 a month or whatever it is, and there are all these phones, and one of them speaks and thinks your language and culture. And the others, do a good job. They're translated, and translations are okay. In Mexico, you don't speak Mexican Spanish, you speak Castilian Spanish, but it's kind of weird, but I get used to it. No, this particular model is, the iPhone, pick your country. You're more inclined to pick that one. Point one. So now there's a moat for Samsung, or at least a competitive advantage for Samsung. Thing two, all of these smartphone people want you to migrate to the newest, latest version, even though the newest, latest version is irrelevantly, it's trivially more interesting than the last one. It's kind of semi-planned obsolescence. And they'll give you a new color, or some improvement. That's incrementalism, and that's you would say, because you're radical, you'd say that's the stupidity of capitalism. I would simply say that's profit maximization gone bad. But in any event, if you walk into that same telco and you see your brand, you pick a Samsung or whatever it is, 5 models, and one of them, the new one, is actually thinks your language and culture, and the other ones don't think it. And one of them is, is a me out of the box with medical education and other benefits. You're more inclined to not use the 5-year-old model. And any incremental migration up from last year's or 5-year-ago model to this one is massively profitable to any smartphone manufacturer. Those two things I just said is a business model, because you then say, okay, I want rent for that, for that competitive benefit. There are 2 more. Do you want them more? But are you convinced that there might be a business model? I'm not going to give you 2 more. Let's turn to your other question, which I forgot what it is.
Well, I just want to interject for a second. I mean, you can think about different ways of funding, right? And those are going to probably tend towards different downsides. We can think of venture funding, and that's going to imply having an exit and having as high a valuation as possible.
Yeah.
I would, without having thought about it that much, argue that ethical considerations go to the wayside. You have a fiduciary duty to maximize return for shareholders, and the consequences be damned. The second model that we could imagine, for example, is a utility, right? That it's owned publicly, and you have users who are paying for it. And you can imagine another model similar to a single payer healthcare, where it's part of your wireless service is you pay a small fee for AI medical care. So each of those implies a different set, or involves a different set of incentives that are centered around different moral choices, ethical perspectives. I'm wondering if you have thoughts on that. You mentioned the health minister and 50 cents per citizen, for example, and that funds a much different approach to the use of AI, I would think, than VC looking to cash out.
Absolutely. And again, the 3 of us can sit in committee and suggest to 173 countries that there are these 3, models, or maybe 5 models, but maybe 10 models, and a recommendation which one they ought to pick. And there's a United Nations badge on our front door, and nobody cares. So it has to be done organically from within the culture's sensibilities of how they want to run it, which they will make mistakes, but that's what it is. So, however, let me give you a specific why, the path that I've chosen to take on this one. Maybe the wrong one, but the path I've chosen to take. One, the benefits are of AI as we see them are distributed basically for free. So it's completely democratized to everybody. The only expense that they have is this $46 or whatever it ends up being, which they're going to do anyway because they need a cell phone. I mean, they need a phone. That's a done deal. If you walk into into a telco shop to get a phone or something, you want one. And the only question now is, for free, you get all this power, AI power, that's hyper-personalized to you. Do you want it or not? If the answer is no, then no. In Latin America, there is a project, one of these 50 projects is Latin America. There's a project that is sponsored by Chile, of all people, before this new president, that I'm sure Michael admires. And the 12 countries, 12 nations have signed up to build their sovereign AIs in the style that I described. Do you know the budget for the 12 countries? $550,000. That's kind of like a dinner bill for a medium-sized conference. It's a joke. It's pathetic compared to the kind of civilizational questions you are posing. So my kind of solution is this: get a fund together, go into these countries. They probably each need 25, 35 million to, something like that, to mount the kind of effort that it takes to organize that real model. And here it is. But that has to be, to your earliest complaint, that has to be a transaction into a private entity, not a government entity. If it's a government entity, it's already we have issues. Sort of the local equivalent of First Amendment. I mean, we have issues. It has to be private, and with some government influence and participation for sure in authoritarian countries, but it has to be fundamentally private. And the capital that goes in will look for an exit. So that's the deal. And that's a deal I'm perfectly happy to make. The institutional investors that I've spoken to, who are sitting on $9-point-something trillion in Luxembourg alone, where I just visited, alone. And the money sitting on the sidelines is looking for these kinds of things. Some of them, the alternatives, are looking for these kinds of things. You take some, we'll apply to all these countries. Good things and bad things will happen in those countries. Why? Because some people will grab the AI in the country and pervert it. Okay, got that. And it'll be a private sector transaction. That's where I place my bet, with public participation, but not at the governance of the entity level, but simply at the sort of at the margin, at the edges, which is where it belongs.
Well, with that mention of government,
yeah, it might be wrong, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it until new facts come along. And then
within the United States, to narrow the focus, pick any country, any jurisdiction. What do you think the appropriate role of government is with respect to at least two things? Number one, guardrails. We have export controls. We have certain uses of certain kinds of tools and technologies that are outlawed. And second of all, to mitigate the effects. Agriculture it was extremely disrupted. It was very lowercase v violent. And every major technological inflection point has proven that. Some of that is about restricting certain uses, but the other is, after the horse is out of the barn, how do you mitigate the harm?
Okay.
What is your view of government's appropriate role?
So let's get real politics stuff here. What I worry about the most is a hierarchy of things that start on that side of the bracket of extinction. And what can government do about those? What can government do about rogue agents that deep fake their way into people hating each other and starting the nuclear war that you referred to? Let's start with things that are really, really momentous that people should not do. Well, what role should government have when AI that is super intelligent? In other words, it's making its own goals that are closely related to what the goals of the human is. It's kind of like traffic law in Manhattan. It's a helpful hint of what the human actually wanted. Then they make up their own, and then they go learn. They code themselves to go learn what they need to learn. And then most of them are good. Some of them are rogue. And the rogue ones are the ones I care about. Criminals love AI. Oh my God, what a gift. What a gift. So make a list of criminality. Just a long list. That's what I worry about. And the role of government should be to pre-think that, force in some way, whatever technological or legal or regulatory or even market restraint can mitigate those and put people in jail. That's a proper role of government I would totally support. and that. Now, the one you mentioned is the subtle one that everybody's really interested in. For example, when millions and millions of people are thrown out of work because they're redundant, because AI does a better job with less errors, and in superintelligence, you can't tell if it's a human or not, and you sort of prefer the AI. That's a reality that will absolutely come. Alan Turing would not have known that part. And when we went blowing past the Turing test, the famous Turing test, in 2025 or so, nobody noticed. So the future is, what do you do with these hundreds of millions of people who really didn't catch on to the need to understand AI on a personal level? And when the thing went exponential, they cannot catch up. They're done for now. Yeah, long run, they'll be reabsorbed, and we've covered that as very nice for the long run, but I live in the short run. That's a very important, subtle question. And people ask that question, and there's no answer. And people ask me that question, and there's no answer. So what happens when you have a large unemployed base of people in any country, particularly young youth, young males? Not good things. That's a bomb. That's an absolute bomb in the center of any culture and society. Germany didn't do very well with a large unemployment pool in World War II. We don't want that. So that has to be addressed and mitigated. Unanswered question, Tom. If you have an answer, please divulge it right now, because we're all interested in the answer. It unanswered. And that's the nature of these mega paradigm shifts. You sort of at first don't even know the question. Don't even know the question, because it's so new and violent and strange.
And see, I don't think it's that hard. I mean, I think there are some old bottles into which this new wine can be poured. And the New Deal is one model for it. I grew up in the Rust Belt, right? There were all sorts of things that the first 4 years of FDR's first term that would have been solutions to massive unemployment, and which were stymied. And then we don't need to reinvent those kinds of things.
Yeah.
We don't need to reinvent the notion of a safety net. We don't need to reinvent the notion of social insurance. We don't need to reinvent any of these things. We need to do them.
Yeah. Now, there's a big difference. If you are a worker, there's no change in the cognitive infrastructure because you don't have AI. If you're thrown out of work as a worker, and then the economy comes back, you can go back to work. Your skills, you can go back to work, or you can migrate to the West and get a job. But again, you are a worker. You're a worker. This one is, if you miss the AI kind of thing, you may not actually have the skills to be interesting. So it's a much worse problem than simply creating an FDR safety net. Second one, we do have an example of a country that has taken this thing very seriously, and it's called China. And China said we have to live, a long time ago, we have to lift our base out of subsistence, and they did it pre-AI. Now they're pouring trillions of dollars into AI, into frontier AI. That's actually being done on a private basis. DeepSeek just announced that they're like 10x, 5x more powerful and 1/5 the cost or something of American AI. I mean, it's an astonishing announcement. And so China is pouring money into it. Their regulatory schema around that industry seems heavy-handed on the outside, but it's actually almost deregulated. They're pouring tons and tons of money into quantum technologies, which is the next discontinuity. And we're not. They're pouring tons of money into fission and fusion, without which there's no electrons, and without electrons there's no tokens, and without tokens there's no nothing. And by the way, fusion is my other project, is the great unlock for abundance.
Yeah. No, when I hear abundance, I don't get my gun out, as Goring said. I get my bullshit meter out. And
oh, wait a minute, Michael. Now you've been pressing me. Let me press you right back. Please tell me how when energy is available on a distributed basis through micro modular fusion, using essentially converted ocean water, and has cheap electrons to make the water under your ground sweet, so you can drink it, and you can then put that water in the ground and make food, and take a big chunk of the cost out of household energy cost, company, firm, and nation net level. How that's a bullshit meter? How that triggers your bullshit meter? Because I'm triggering my bullshit meter to your bullshit meter. Is how does that not register in your mind as something like a wonderful thing?
If it could happen, I agree. I just don't, I don't see.
Okay, so you're putting your bet.
The keyword in your sentence was distribution.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what we always have is a problem there, right? The distribution of this suddenly more available energy. Who controls that distribution, and how does it get distributed, both physically and economically?
Okay, let's make two bets and see if they're good. Bet number one: fusion will not be solved in the next 10 years. I have reasons to argue, and I'm happy to argue.
I know you think it's likely.
Yeah, and I can give you exactly sort of a through line that makes it quite plausible and probably very likely. The first of a kind will be out there. Two, it's more efficient to make micromodular than to make these gigantic mega plants, for many reasons, not including the technology keeps moving. And anyone who knows anything about calculus, you don't want to invest in things that are going to be obsolete when the technology moves quickly. You want to do it incrementally. That naturally lends itself to small. Third, resilience. It's really easy to drop drones that are brilliant, million drones, on a very large data center or energy plant. If you micromodular, it's 7 cargo containers, and you put them in the backyard of somewhere, which takes care of the AI. That's a couple, 2, 3 cargo containers. Takes care of the energy. Initially fission, which I'm not thrilled about, but which is necessary, by the way, and fusion, which I'm very thrilled about, and some other things, cooling and batteries and controls. You've got yourself a distributed system which is resilient and is a 25-year battery or 30-year battery. It's actually longer than that because you just keep pouring in relatively available fuel. But eventually, the low yield radioactivity will exhaust the magnets and the lasers and all the things that are in the fusion containment chamber. You have to replace it. 25 years? You want to replace it. So no big deal. Now that's a scenario that says you got to make a bet, Michael. And you shouldn't make this bet. You're going to lose it. Number one, fusion will not be achieved. And number two, that people will hew for all kinds of, who knows, superstitious reasons to big. Big, you're right. It does not lend itself to distribution. Small does. Oh, incidentally, if you do small, guess what you don't have to do? A grid. Which is very expensive. All grids were built on the wrong electrical technology. They're built on, basically, no, they're wrong. So they all have to be kind of upgraded and replaced. The trillions of dollars it would take to actually modernize any electrical grid, put it into fusion. Solve the whole problem locally, more or less.
Well, I think I want to interject that it seems to me that part of what this discussion is animated by is a vision of technology, to point out a theme that's in the book, or a thread of the tapestry the book tries to weave, is technology as empowering, as in liberating, as in something that advances individual human existence. And Mike, as a counterpoint to your concern, it certainly seems like digital communication devices are extremely widely distributed. Now, part of that is because there was a government infrastructure, namely the internet, but through commerce.
Yeah, you don't need the internet. You don't need the internet for distributed cellular, to be clear.
Fair enough. But the concern I have with the future vision of fusion is based on my general magic experience, that all of those benefits are orthogonal to a new type of problem that it'll usher in. So I don't dispute that it would be great not to pay my electric bill or worry about power outages. But when I'm pondering, listening to the two of you engage in the discussion about it, is fair enough. But what are we not getting about the new world that would usher in? I think that's this sticking point I'm
Yeah.
getting to.
So
And maybe
remember,
that's a rationalization
No,
for
no,
being
no, no.
Luddite, but I don't think so.
No, that's good, Tom. So let me do what I said people should do, and right at the head of this, head end of this thing. To be intellectually honest about the upside, you've got to embrace the downside. So why don't I flip roles? I'll flip roles. I'll go completely dystopian on you, and then invite you to argue with me right back from the positive side. You willing to play that game?
Sure,
Let's do
absolutely.
it.
Yeah. But you can't say, yes, you're absolutely right. It's horrible. You have to actually
No. And
play the game.
just
You have
put a
to play the
column
game.
up. I put a column up about the wonderful world of medical innovation driven by AI. I mean, I'm all, I'm not,
I'd be
I'm
happy
not
with
ironic.
your article. I'd be happy with your book if you actually took both sides.
Mm.
And
I
think
want to remind Mike,
Uh,
Mark,
uh-oh.
I don't think you know this. When Mike departed General Magic, one of the parting gifts was a homemade spinner. And it just said at the very top, Dr. No.
Okay.
No matter where the pointer landed, one was inconceivable. One was, why the F would we ever do that? Another was, that's the stupidest question I've heard all week. I think another one was, who are you kidding? Another was,
I love
no,
it.
my office. So
I
Mike,
still have it.
Can you make a copy and send it to my house? I love it too.
for Mike to be favorable, for him to be bullish on something is really saying something. And with that, I will shut up and listen
That's
to
the
your
challenge to the next little segment of this episode. That's a
right.
challenge.
So let's
You
hear
gotta
your
jump out of you.
dystopian vision for us.
So the downside of the energy abundance piece that you see coming.
Well, you're going to give me the downside. I was going to give you the downside, but go ahead.
No. Remember, we're switching roles now, right?
Okay, all right.
So, what are the possible risks risks of that world?
Okay,
and what are the things that
I don't like abundant energy because I'm now in role, I don't like abundant energy of that sort, which is kind of infinite and not expensive, because
you already prejudiced. Come on, Mark.
They teach you that in debate.
I don't like this delicious chocolate cake. That's the best thing I've ever tasted.
Yeah,
They teach you what I don't like about it. Okay, go ahead.
No fair. You got to do it fairly.
Mike, it's rhetoric. It's fine. I told you I'd taken the opposite position, so I just did. Is that bad things will be cheaper to build, and that's the point. So there will be, I'm making this up. There will be weapons that depend on on energy and depend on all kinds of things to shoot pulses of death rays at you. By the way, that's a real application. And with really cheap energy, that's actually very viable. Okay, you just carry along some of these cargo containers, and you got yourself your own sort of amazing power plant, and you put a laser on it, and you can shoot anything and kill anything like really effectively. So anything that needs energy for bad things will do better. It'll cost less. It'll actually open up the business model, so to speak, of that bad thing. Things that today that are really bad could fail, a good market failure, they could fail because the energy component of that bad thing is too expensive. So if you remove that, then that bad thing business model becomes viable and you make it. Now that's a long list of bad things that could happen. Another bad thing, which is kind of an interesting, sort of ace of spades trump card here. I promise not to use that word. Is it just makes me, not well. Is the following: is population explosion. The carrying capacity of the world is already there, and if you have abundance, terrible, because people will love when something is free or cheap and it's a good thing. People overconsume it. We will absolutely overconsume it. Whoopee! Let's have 11 children. Because there's a safety net to your earlier kind of, ancient piece of history evocation, which I'm surprised isn't. Sometimes history is useful. That one is partially useful. So, so we have, universal basic income. We have this, we have that. Let's have 11 kids. That will destroy the planet. And part of having that abundance, is having cheap electrons that are so cheap that you still want to meter them. But, really, Like, we don't meter cell phones anymore, right? You buy for $50 a month. It's all you can eat. I see electrons being sort of in that zone in some way. So there'll be overconsumption, and we'll have population, or not. So let me give you the or not. Korea is in terrible crisis, a wealthy country, a technically optimistic country, because they have, I think, the lowest birth rate in the world, if I'm not mistaken, or close to it, maybe in the developed world. I mean, it's just a disaster for them. And so, maybe we won't have 11 kids. But these kinds of consequences to be intellectually honest, Michael, is you have to sit down and brainstorm the red team torpedoes. And the reason I started, Tom, with extinction level bad things is because you're looking for the Class A torpedoes that if they hit, you're dead. Class B torpedoes. Do you remember that movie with Tom Hanks where he was driving a convoy, a battleship cruiser, protecting a convoy going in World War II, and you had no air cover. It was in that zone of the Atlantic, and the U-2 wolves came at them and were killing soldiers, ships right and left, sinking thing, and they came after him. And the sailor said, "Torpedo!" And he went hard left, port, rudder, starboard, and the torpedo. He was able to turn the ship. Here we go. Hit the ship. He was able to turn the ship just fast enough that it glanced off the side. Class B torpedoes. You can see them. They can be fatal. You can maneuver around them. Class B. Class C torpedoes is just chatter. Is just people coming up with edge conditions, and that's the majority of what I hear. Chatter. It's very cheap and lazy. It's like swearing. If you don't want to articulate an emotion, you say fuck. No, you say I'm frustrated because of but the lazy approach is just to swear. That's what I call Class C torpedoes. Not that interesting. You just have to suppress. Yeah, go ahead, Tom. By the way, I didn't accuse you of Class C torpedoes.
As Mike knows, I never see a fucking problem with swearing. But no, that is, I think, a very prescient and insightful way of prioritizing the risks. And if there's one thing I think everyone can agree on is that there's no shortage of opportunity to, for clickbait or, doom scroll content related to AI. One of the things I wanted to extract from what you were saying is the two crucial questions with respect to innovation are, number one, what does it facilitate? What new kinds of things does it enable? And to think as expansively about what constraints does it remove? And think really broadly about that. And second of all, what kind of behavior does it incentivize? Not just make possible, but make tempting in a way that was unthinkable before.
Okay, good. I'll make one last really dystopian point, and then we'll go into this really positive thing that you just asked about, which I congratulate you for asking. Is the really dystopian thing is when superintelligence is cheap, it too will be overconsumed. If I'm a criminal and I can get my hands on long list of really horrible things for cheap or free, I'm going to overconsume that. So the dystopian argument is there will be more criminals who do more criminal things in a smarter way. So you can.
Yeah, and I thought the whole notion of having a me and having that me wrangle all these agents for hire, including life coaches and companions. I see that as a I'm back to my dystopian. I see that as the destructiveness of social media on steroids, that it will fundamentally alienate kids as they grow. You talked about kids being super intelligent natives, the way that they're digital natives now. I can't imagine a world in which children grow up having their phone be the most important thing in their life, not just because of it lets them hook up with their friends, but because it gives them all the emotional sustenance they need.
Yeah, well, I didn't go emotional.
That's a terrifying.
Mike, to put a boundary on it, I didn't talk about emotional satisfaction at all. Right. So,
but isn't that what a companion does?
I'm not even talking about that yet. So let me go into that future. Okay, let me go into that fog bank and invite you up there. This is the not yet known, the kind of glimmers. of things that might be out there. That was Tom's, out of character utopian question, right? Is what good things could be out there? When I'm out there, what I see first and foremost is science. That's what I see out there as the great unlock. And what I see as pernicious or potentially pernicious is cognitive, the large language model. Why? Because when you have a mega amplifier of the sort we've never seen before, it mega amplifies every part of the human condition. So to the extent people are horrible, they'll be mega horrible. To the extent people are wonderful, they'll be mega wonderful. And this is the greatest amplifier, cognitive amplifier ever for those who participate in it. Not everyone will participate. So there will be all kinds of inventions and brilliant things that happen when people's minds are magnified. And that could be a zero-sum game where there'll be as many horrible people magnifying as wonderful. I'm on the side. There'll be a lot of wonderful things done. But science. Just my hero Demis, just for a moment. It was a meeting in January, not too long ago, in a foreign country, and there were people in the Vatican, from the Vatican, sitting in the room of maybe 80 people, and everyone else from the elite, the people that you would view as the elite of AI that are the enemy of the people. Right? They were all there, which I would view as leaders of it. And Demis said, what we're doing is we're now basically digging into the very foundations of everything that the universe is built out of. Atoms and subatoms, molecules of various sorts that do not exist yet in nature. If they do, they're not in our immediate, solar system that we know about. And we are trying to do things with them that are beneficial. Medical is one class of examples. Materials is another class of examples. And there are third, fourth, and fifth classes. But just those two things. The fog bank, my fog bank, it's sort of, condo up there in that fog bank, says that will happen. Science will be revolutionized. And what he said in the presence of these Vatican people is, my friends from the Vatican and I, and the humanists and philosophers are also in the room, deep thinkers, also in the room. Journalists, just to make you feel, really, in the room, but good, really solid thinkers. What we all are kind of reaching at is the mind of God. Jaws dropped. It's like, what? What is he saying? Well, what he's saying is that the Vatican people are trying to kind of understand the deepest mysteries of the universe and human nature and political stuff, but of the universe through their profound belief in how that happened. Perfectly consistent and coherent. Once you're into that model, it totally works. Totally works. You just read the Bible and you're good. And the philosophers and humanists are trying to understand it, in sort of ideological terms, human nature terms, social organization terms. And we scientists are trying to say, okay, subparticles. Okay, let's start with there. So what's inside the atoms, and when you crack them, and by the way, that's, fusion does that. Just a little plug for fusion. It does that, and then how do we combine them in interesting ways to do things that God hasn't yet figured out? Because God uses nature as his lab. I'm assuming it's a he, because men are clearly better than women. No, that's not true. So so the natural lab is nature, and nature takes its time. So we don't want it. We're impatient. So we want to do in quantum calculations and other kinds of calculations, AI. They're only done with AI on chips that don't yet exist. By the way, real chips that don't exist yet. So they're not here yet. Q chips. I can talk about that too if you let me. To come up with things that are like amazing. So so the punchline to every joke about people like us is, oh, you're going to cure world hunger, cancer, and war. The answer is yeah. It's exactly where we're headed. That's our objective function. That's our goal. That's our North Star. So that's what I see out there. Is people, and I don't belong in that class because they're actually doing it. I'm just talking about it. But I enjoy talking about it, because that's where that group of people who are completely conversant in the horribleness of AI. Happy to talk about it. Happy to spend an hour, proving to you that it might as well just go commit suicide because it's over. But we who actually are, that's where I live. It's not science uber alles. It's because you could say God. I believe in God, but my God is a science, and my science is rooted to using advanced AI that we're just beginning to understand now. I'm very optimistic about that. I have one more comment I want to make. The comment I want to make is the peak experience of my life was shared with the two of you, and others. And I just wanted to. I always pause to thank the people that came on that journey because they had enough belief in me is not the way to think. They had enough of their own vision that when a vision was presented to them, they said, "That's my vision too." And that's what we all did. So, Mike, Hersh, thank you for being on that journey. And here we are, decades later, talking about yet another revolution, which is a million times more powerful than the one we did. However, as we said on this show, the democratization of that incredible revolution is right back to what we did: smartphone. How about that for a full circle irony?
That's good. Yeah. And it was the most life-changing experience I ever had.
Me too.
And it stayed with us. Here we are, 30 years.
Here we are. Talking about the next revolution. So it's all a very beautiful arc. And I just wanted to, really express my heartfelt gratitude for you for what you did. It wasn't without pain, which is the duality. But here we are talking about optimistic things and other things.
Yeah, and how to get it right this time.
How to get it right this time in the beginning of this revolution, when we are not entitled to actually know what the questions are.
Mark, a question out of left field, but of course, why stop now? The film Terminator and its sequels, entertaining sci-fi or documentaries ahead of their time?
I love the question. Since I've been out there talking about superintelligence and things like that, I've actually perceived the center of gravity, the pendulum, swung to the Terminator side. In people that theoretically I would have said, no, these are the optimists. Gen Z, Gen Alpha. My own kids, 11 years old, are swinging to the negative. And I absolutely expected, alter carcass to go there because it's scary. People are scared of things that they can't actually understand or do. And especially when they've checked out and said, I'm done. I'm 65, I'm retired, it's over. But young people who are supposed to be optimistic, going negative, to me is a harbinger of a class A torpedo for this entire AI thing. They for reasons that they do articulate, haven't articulated, who knows, intuitively don't like it. It's really, really interesting. And that's a torpedo on Alexandria and everything else that we're doing. So here I am trying to be intellectually honest and give you stuff. Is it a documentary? Well, movies are fantastic, and 90% of the movies are dystopian because they appeal. Look, if you're in the jungle, the savannah, wherever you are, and you're not looking to be scared of the saber-toothed tiger and you're going to be out of the gene pool. You're going to be out of the gene pool. So we are existentially trained to be hyper aware of danger, survival type stuff, which means dangerous and scary and Terminator. That's what we do. So when we see a movie like that, we go to the box office. When we see Sound of Music, well, we go there too because the songs are great. But when we see a kind of a soapy, optimistic thing, but it's the hard stuff that hits. And so the answer is that's the answer. So it's a good movie, by the way. It's a great movie.
Yeah, well, Sweet Story has gotten the uptake it's gotten because in this time of grotesque horror, it actually tells a story about human connection and community, and people want that these days. I mean, the reception has been so much more than we ever expected.
Yeah, fantastic.
Because people actually do need to smell the roses every once in a while, even though there's always a tiger in the bush.
Yeah. There is room for the hyper optimist, the cheerleader, the make you feel good guy. There really is, and I've seen it. I've seen people who, unabashedly go do keynotes with, and all they do is just, it's going to be great, it's going to be fabulous, don't worry, it's going to be wonderful. They're very popular speakers because they come in with a nice anti-anxiety drug, and which also is a very that's a very successful, by the way, it's a very successful product. It's anti-anxiety drugs.
Well, again, I want to thank you, Mark, for taking the time.
Yeah,
to do
Mark,
this.
it's always
a pleasure.
mind expand.
It's always a pleasure to hear you talk about the things that might be. It got me 30 years ago. it gets me now. So it's great to be part of that.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and Tammy, thank you for it also, and everybody else behind the camera there that I don't see. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for listening to General Magic and the Soul of Tech podcast. Tune into our Substack for more interviews and articles at spellboundproductions.substack.com.